Hello, my name is Jackson, and the film I chose for my final project was Beasts of No Nation. The film is a fictional story of a child soldier in an undisclosed West African nation. It was written and directed by Kerry Joji Fokonaji, and it was Netflix's one of their first big ventures into full-length films, and it was an original film, so it kind of led to more of their original content and films that you see nowadays. It helped catapult that release on their streaming services. Here's a official trailer of the film. For the cinematic elements of the film, we start out with a introduction of the main character and narrator Agu, and you see his village and his backstory and where they live is a buffer zone of the conflict between NDF rebels and the government. And in the scenes where we see this village get taken over by rebels and then soon government soldiers, the government soldiers end up killing and taking out everyone that was still remaining, thinking they were still rebels, even though they're just civilians that are in a buffer zone, bad time, bad place. So in that scene, we see a lot of like music and bullet sounds and the slowing of the camera to amplify the tension that Agu and his family feel in that moment. And Agu, the actor that plays him, he did a great job and displayed a very authentic portrayal of being a child soldier in West Africa. And he was only 13 years old, so it was a very good performance. And then the film featured many child soldiers beyond Agu, because his group that he joins, the fictional group NDF, they're composed of mostly child soldiers. So it's fitting and it gives an authentic feel to the film, as this is probably common in some countries with conflicts. And then the camera work to emphasize the ridiculousness of the child soldiers in the war and just the sadness they feel sometimes. The camera work really helps amplify that. And in scenes where the tension would be off or very high, the camera would change from a steady shot to a shaky, almost handheld-like camera shot, which added just much more to the tension of the war scenes. And in one scene where Agu has to officially be allowed into the group and given a weapon, he has to kill a potentially innocent civil engineer who's begging for his life in the moment. And so he hits him on the top of his head with a machete as a lot of the peer pressure gets to Agu. And the blood splatters all over the camera, which draws the audience's attention right away and kind of amplifies this turning point for Agu from being an innocent young boy to following a path of carnage that he doesn't know where it's leading, and the audience is not sure yet. And here are some facts about child soldiers across the world, and it kind of emphasizes how it's not yet going away, even with the COVID pandemic and other things, and just time going on. This issue isn't out of reach. And here are some South Sudanese filmmakers in a U.S. government-funded training for a documentary they're working on about child soldiers. This is a tweet. And this kind of feeds into the cultural significance of the film, as South Sudanese, that area and those people have experienced a lot of conflict, and a lot of child soldiers have been used in that area. So working on a documentary about that it's good for the betterment of their culture and kind of getting rid of the stigma behind being a child soldier. Because this stigma that these child soldiers have after battling and being in wars and having experienced sexual violence and heavy drug use, they need the stigma to be lowered because they couldn't control their situation and were kind of, in most cases, they were forced to do their harmful actions that they performed. So, destroying the stigma and making it a normal, open conversation can help get rid of this issue in South Sudan and across Africa. And another cultural aspect I kind of viewed from this film is the emphasis on quickly becoming a man and displaying masculinity. This is used a lot by the commandant, who's played by Idris Elba, probably the highest profile actor in this film. But his use of this cultural aspect is it's used to amplify the violence in the boys and try to get them to perform his violent orders in a quicker and a manly way or whatnot. Try to enforce his orders through this way. And here's a scene where he displays what I'm talking about. He'll chant and create a little anthem to amp them up and slowly get them into the battle zone and have them follow his orders. And here's a child soldier, and his story. Very tragic, but it's very similar to Agu, because even though Agu is a fictional story, it takes a lot of aspects of other child soldiers' stories, and similar to this one, the UNICEF video of a true story of a South Sudan child soldier. And here is an article about the sexual violence against child soldiers. And it kind of emphasizes that aspect of it that isn't talked as much about as the violence and the hand-to-hand combat that the child soldiers perform. And then here's my personal response to the film. I believe it transported me and the audience to the jungles of West Africa. It utilizes many cinematic elements and uses a very authentic background as they use Ghana for their locations. And then I felt like I would have a similar experience to Agu as he lost himself and his innocence after being forced into and kind of performing the NDF's orders. He kind of lost himself. And I would likely also get into the drugs that he did, because dealing with the sexual violence that Striker and Agu experienced with the commandant is hard to experience it, especially at 13 years old, younger than that. So I feel like I'd have a similar experience, and it'd be a hard time for me as well. But other than that sour note, the film was great, and it was a good watch. I recommend.